let's take a moment to talk about what's coming up in the next 2 weeks. So next week we're going to have integrating human factors in your QMS with a speaker from Clarimed who will be talking about the QMSR requirements, ISO 1345, alignment by the FDA. And the fact that human factors is really going to be integrated throughout the QMS. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a collaborative workshop, and I'm hoping everyone will participate, where we're going to build the deck together rather than having the speaker go through the deck. We're going to build the outline of the deck, and we're going to walk through filling in all the parts. So basically identifying all the places where human factors shows up throughout the life cycle and the QMS and 13485 and QMSR and tie it all together into a nice, neat package. How's that sound, everyone? Good?
Sounds like fun.
We gonna show up for that? Um, okay, that is number one. And then the following week, we are going to have a session with Tino Chow, who I met recently at the MedTech Symposium in Philadelphia, who's going to be talking about honing your MedTech message, how to be memorable in 2 minutes. And his basic assertion is that it's hard to be memorable these days. Um, particularly when you go to a lot of pitches. Anybody who's been to a pitch fest has listened to 10 pitches in a row, can't remember the first eight by the time they get to the end. So how do you become memorable either as a founder pitching or as a consultant trying to stand out in a crowded marketplace? So this is really something for everyone. And I encourage everybody to come on the 18th. I don't see any reason to have a Friday in Focus call on December 25th. I think that'd be really strange. Um, and same for New Year's. I think that what we'll do is we'll start after the new year, if that's okay with everyone. Any objections, please, start screaming and yelling. Hi, Carrie. Welcome. I encourage the rest of you to join on camera, but if you want to be invisible, remain invisible. Francesca will promote you. Feel free to just turn it down. Uh, let's get started. I want to introduce Rob Packard. Rob Packard is the president of Medical Device Academy, and has been educating the MedTech market on FDA and all sorts of things related to getting your medical device approved. Has worked with hundreds of startups and small to medium-sized businesses, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and do a better job than I'm doing right at the moment. Um, Rob, thank you for coming. What do you have for us today?
Today we're going to talk a little bit about auditing. And I know everybody thinks auditing is so exciting, but I will do my best to show you the light of why it's so exciting. But as far as a little bit about me, for those of you that haven't seen me, and I don't think there's anybody out there that hasn't, I know Leo's seen me forever. Um, my
Really?
background's I started out in the medical device in 2000, but before that I worked in the pharmaceutical industry in R&D. And when I started out in the medical device industry, I didn't start in quality, I didn't start in regulatory. I actually was working in operations, and then I became CEO of my own medical device company. And I know this will shock Leo, but I actually had an electromedical device.
I knew that, Rob. We've talked
Yeah.
about it a few times.
So the last thing I did in my entire medical device career was picked up quality and regulatory, and I did it grudgingly. And when I say grudgingly, I was this close to quitting or getting fired, and I wasn't sure which way the lunch meeting was going to go. And I calmed myself down, had a couple extra sips of the iced tea, and I said, you know, this might be a really good consulting business because nobody likes doing paperwork. And maybe quality and regulatory would be the place to be if I could do the paperwork better than everybody else. And it's always going to get more complicated. The paperwork's going to get thicker and thicker and thicker, and everybody's going to want to outsource it. Now, if I were to think about it today and I listened to other people, they would tell me, AI is going to replace you. We're just going to do all the quality and regulatory paperwork with AI. Um, I think that's extremely unlikely since we haven't even been able to figure out how to get AI to write a standard yet. But if we can get AI to write all the reports for us, I'll jump on that bandwagon when they can prove it to me. But in the auditing world, um, the day that I actually became a professional auditor, I remember sitting at the table of it was actually in my office at a medical device company. And I was considering taking a job with BSI to become a full-time auditor. And I said, do I really want to do this? And I said, this is going to be my pathway into consulting. Should I do this? And couldn't make up my mind. And the phone rang, and it was somebody asking me to do a big consulting project, and they needed an auditor that could do it. I was like, well, I guess the decision is made. And I walked down the hall and handed in my resignation, quit my job, and became a full-time auditor. Now I teach people how to audit, which I love to do. But the one thing that I think has changed dramatically since that day in 2009, now I actually love auditing. I don't love traveling 7 days a week, which was what I did for BSI, but I love auditing because I get to go and meet other people and I get to learn about their quality system and their product, and then I get to help them improve it. And that's the fundamental difference between my mindset in 2009 when I looked at it as this is just a consulting business for me to now I actually really enjoy doing this. And the how you get to that mindset can be a lot faster than it was for me if you learn some of the things that I've learned over time up front. And there was nobody there to explain those to me. Should I keep on talking, or do we have any questions?
Well, what
Um,
what is the qualification to be an auditor?
Um, to be an auditor, you have to have training on the whatever you're auditing against. So you're auditing to a standard or a contract, some requirement that's written down, and you're making sure that the company or the operation or the process is compliant with whatever that documented requirement is. So it's really just a verification of, are you doing this? So you need training on that area, at least to the point where you understand the jargon and can ask intelligent questions. You don't necessarily have to be a subject matter expert in that area, but you have to know enough at least to ask the questions and read the records and understand them. I love to learn, so I always went a little bit further to try to learn more about it than most auditors would. And I think that makes a real difference in the quality of questions you ask. When you really want to learn about something and understand it, you ask smart questions that really show your thinking. When you are just going through the motions, you say, can I see a record? Can I see a document? You don't really care what document or record you get. Just throw some paper in front of me and I'll write something about it and I'll get my report done and you'll be happy and I'll be happy and I'll leave. But that's not really auditing. Auditing, you really have to understand what's important and what kind of problems they are having, if any. Maybe everything is going swimmingly and there's nothing that you need to fix. But at least you have to ask enough questions so you understand that. And I don't think auditors that are sort of going through the motions get that far. The thing we like to describe is checklist audits. I have a checklist. It tells me to ask this question. I asked that question. You gave me an answer. I wrote it down. I turned it into a report. Anybody can do that, but that's really just going through the motions. If you are really adding value as an auditor, you're asking smart questions instead of dumb questions. And the dumbest question I ever heard, I was at a facility, and I mean, it's been so many years now. It was a company that makes tampons. So we'll give you that much information. And the other auditor working with me tells me, and he's the lead auditor. I'm the team member. So he's the boss. My job is to do anything in my power to help him get the audit done on time and correctly. So he said, I'm really concerned they don't have enough traceability of raw materials here. They don't know what raw material lot they use. They don't know what machine they ran it on. They don't know any of this information, and they can't show it to me. I want you to go out there and figure out how they do this because I don't think they're doing it well enough. And I looked at him. I don't know what the look was, but it was just like complete incredibility. Just like, what do you mean? I'm like, this facility has robots. How would the robots know where to go? And he didn't understand that, like, you have to have traceability if the robot knows where to go, but the traceability tag is for the robot, not for you. So everything they had was digital, everything was computerized and automated, and he didn't understand it because he couldn't read it because he didn't read robot. So these little RFID tags everywhere were just messing up his mind. He didn't understand. I'm like, aren't you a computer programmer? Shouldn't you understand this? So it was a really rough week. And at the end of the week, the client said, could you please make sure he never comes back and please only let them send you back? So that's not how you want to be as an auditor. You don't want to ask the question like, how do you know how to get there when and not notice the robots walking around?
So what is the difference between a lead auditor and an auditor?
So the lead auditor is responsible for planning the audit. They're responsible for the agenda. They're responsible for the opening meeting, the closing meeting, and the final report. So any decisions about what's non-conforming and what's conforming in the final report, those are the final decision of the auditor, not the team members that help them. And if you have a small company and a short audit, you might not have a team. It might be me, myself, and I doing the audit. So then you're both the team member and the lead auditor, and you do everything. But if you're trying to get an audit done faster, you might have another team member. And because some of these audits, particularly the MDSAP audits, Medical Device Single Audit Program audits, those are so long, they're almost always two auditors and typically 3 days each. And so you have it really creates a challenge because we have to have one team of people to help this auditor and another team of people to help this auditor. And a lot of times to save money on travel, one of the team members is off site. Usually the team member is and the lead is on site. So that creates a real challenge because the team's like, I got to keep one Zoom or Teams session open for this person and keep on scanning documents and uploading them for them. And then I got to answer all these other questions for this other person that wants them in paper form. And you might not have enough people in a small company to support two people. So if that's what's coming your way for certification, you need to kind of simulate that in your own internal audits. So even though you might be a small company and might get away with just one auditor, it might be a really good idea to practice that experience and prepare for it by saying, hey, we not only want you to come in here and give us an audit report, but we want you to give us the whole experience so we know what it's going to be like to have a certification body pair come in and do the audit so we know how to support both people at the same time. And so that's part of what auditors sometimes do is they actually simulate what it would be like to have the FDA there or simulate a certification body audit just because that way your team is better prepared. They know what to expect. And then at the end of each day, not during in the middle of the audit, at the end of each day, you can have a debrief and say, this worked really well. This worked atrociously. Never do that again. And you can do some consulting as an internal auditor or a supplier auditor. But the third party auditors and the FDA inspectors, they're not allowed to do any consulting of any kind. They can't even write opportunities for improvement. So that's considered too much like consulting. So they can literally only tell you what you've done wrong or that you've done things right, but they can't tell you how to improve. And so certification body audits are almost absolutely useless to a company from a value add standpoint. And I think, unfortunately, that's where everybody gets their impression of audits, is because the person that is required by law to do it isn't allowed to give you any advice. But when you hire somebody to come in to do an independent first party or second party audit, an internal audit or a supplier audit, if that person doesn't add value, kick them out of your building. Hire somebody else. And ask for references. Say, what kind of value did he bring to your company? How did he help? How did she help? Were they personable? Were they boring? Were they funny? Were they blunt and very, this is what you need to fix. This is what's wrong. Or were they afraid to make any waves? And what are their strengths? Does this person really know a lot about sterilization? Do they know a lot about software? Do they know a lot about electrical engineering? What are their expertise? Because nobody's an expert in everything. So you might need more than one. You might want to rotate. Like this year, we're going to have this person. Next year, we want a different perspective. So you get a different person. Not just because we didn't like their perspective, but because if we have the same person looking at it every year, eventually they're going to get a little stale and start looking at the same things the same way. Whereas if I haven't been there for 3, 4 years and I come back, I see all kinds of new things. And my perspective is, wow, you really improved things over here. But what happened over here? You stopped doing this thing that was really good. So that's the kind of feedback you're giving as an auditor when you're hired for a first party internal audit or a second party supplier audit. Those third party audits that are required by law, all you're getting is a piece of paper that says you passed. And you don't technically pass. You either have things that are conforming, so you don't have to write extra paperwork, or you have nonconformities that say you have to write extra paperwork. Ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody has to write more paperwork. So don't get all upset because you got a nonconformity. It's an opportunity to practice your CAPA writing skills. This may be the way to look at it.
Okay, so you've convinced me. I want to be an auditor. Now, how much money am I going to make as an auditor?
Um, an auditor, any consultant, has a range that is typical for what they do. There are some that make very little, and there are some that make a lot. I'm able to charge $350 an hour. Very few auditors charge that much money. When anybody hears that rate, I usually hear a pause or a gulp. Sometimes they never call back. But I don't want to be the cheapest consultant on the planet. I want to be the best. So that's part of what I do. I try to be the best. But when we hire new consultants and we train them, and we teach them how to audit, we typically start people out at $200 an hour after they're ready to be on their own and they can be independent, and they work up to 275. And we have one auditor, Matthew Walker. He's now at 350, but he's been doing this since 2017. And I don't know anybody that writes or reads more than he does except myself. And he's so smart and such a great writer, but he'll sit there with a client and they'll ask a question. And I look at him like, how do you remember all that stuff? He remembers the guidance documents. It's one of the most valuable things that I learned working for BSI. I had handcuffs on. I'm not allowed to give advice, but I want to be value added. So how do I do that as a third party auditor? This is something nobody else does, but I did it. And I said, there might be a guidance document that can help you with that. It might have this number. And if you look on this page in this section, you might find the answer to that. And I actually did that while MHRA, which is the UK competent authority, they were actually observing me, and the guy smiled and he's like, that is a clever approach. You're not allowed to give advice, but you didn't give advice. You pointed them to the guidance document right where they needed to go. That's perfectly legitimate. And the team leader, I was only the team member. The team leader just breathed this huge sigh of relief. I thought you were going to kill us. He was like, no, that's how to do it. You're allowed to point somebody to a guidance document as a third party auditor. So Matthew, I've taught him over time. I was like, you can help them sometimes just by pointing them to the right place to look up the information. If you spoon feed every answer to somebody, that's not always the best solution because they don't always learn. But if you make them look it up, they might actually learn something because they had to struggle a little bit to get the information. And sometimes what I would do, if somebody asked me a question at the beginning of the audit and I gave them a standard, the next day when I came back, I'd say, so what did you find when you looked that up? And they'd look at me like, I was supposed to do that for homework. I'm like, you asked the question. I didn't bring it up. You did. It was important enough to ask, but you didn't think it was important enough to look it up? Should we audit more in that area? He's like, no, I'll look it up. I'll have the answer tomorrow. I'm like, there we go. So I push people a little bit sometimes like, I'm not going to spoon feed you. At $350 an hour, I'm going to make you do a little bit of work. My trainer, he can't give me a pill and make me in better shape. He makes me do planks and push-ups and lift heavy weights. So that's how you're going to learn working at a company. You're going to have to look stuff up, try it, see what works, try it again, see what works, have another auditor come back, challenge you, see if you can get better. But there's no free ride here. I tell my kids all the time, there's no easy way to get better at anything. You have to work. They don't like that answer. I'm like, how did you get good at playing video games? They don't like that answer. It's like, you practice. Did you pick up the video game and instantly you were a savant and could play it well? Even the savants of this world, they only knew how to play chopsticks in the beginning.
So I want to take a moment to ask if anybody in the audience has any questions, but before I ask them if they have any questions for you, I have a few points of clarification. One, has anybody in the audience ever been an FDA auditor, an MDSAP auditor, or worked for a notified body as an auditor, or worked independently as an auditor? Show of hands, or just blurt it out, or all right. So we have some experienced auditors in the audience, and you know, I I guess the word audit gets used rather generically to cover all of those categories. Um, and that's kind of confusing. An official FDA audit versus an independent audit that you hired to come in and give you advice about some part of your system, and then you're talking about auditors and lead auditors, right? And then you're also talking about uh, things like being an auditor for software as a medical device
Yes.
versus any number of other things. So specializations um, and qualifications. Now, this is the part that I was getting to earlier. Is there any credential that I need to call myself an auditor?
Yes, you need to have taken a course that's a lead auditor course. There are companies that offer it as a on-site course. You go and take that course. It's usually several days long, sometimes a whole week. There are also a few online on-demand courses. That's what we're building. Another company that offers that is Statomatrix. There are organizations that offer an online version, like AMI offers one. We created that for AMI. But you have to start at the time we start on Monday morning and finish at the time we start up on Wednesday. And
Hmm.
you'd have people on the West Coast, we'd be starting at 9 a.m., they'd be getting up at 6 a.m. They didn't particularly like that time schedule. And they had to do it the week that it was offered. So the on-demand, self-paced ones are nicer, but the downside of them is you don't have a live instructor answering your questions.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing is there's always the potential somebody buys that course and it just sits in their computer somewhere and collects computer dust. So you
Hmm.
actually have to open up the course and watch it and take it and learn from it. So like I said about the guidance documents, you got to actually go read those guidance documents if you want to learn something. But you have to take a course, but that's part one. There is a part two. The part two is just like when you're driving a car. You went to driver's ed class, you took the exam, you passed the exam, you got your certificate, you passed driver's ed, but now you have to go out there and drive a car on the road. Some people has driver's ed classes where they take you out on the road and drive around with you, but you still have to pass a driver's test, a practical driver's test at the DMV. For auditing, we don't really have the opportunity to say, who would like to volunteer to have their company audited by a whole bunch of trainees? I haven't found anybody that's willing to do that yet. But since COVID, we have this really cool thing that's happened. Everybody's learned how to use Zoom now, and everybody's comfortable with Zoom. And it can be Zoom, it can be Teams, anything else. But now people are also pretty okay with recording it or transcribing it. So now I can have a trainee go do an audit and I can have them record it and I can watch it and they can watch it. And you'd be amazed what you'll learn from watching yourself on a video. We record all kinds of things, but we tend to let them collect that computer dust. But if you actually go back and watch your own videos, which I have to do all the time with this YouTube channel, a cringe moment every single day. I hit play on my video, like, oh, ow! It's physically painful to watch yourself talk, and everybody has that reaction because you know you can do better, but that's how you get better. You watch yourself and say, okay, don't get overwhelmed with all the things you did wrong. Pick one thing to improve and work on that next time. So what we tell trainees, and I did this to Matthew, and he loves doing single process audits because that's how I trained him. I said, instead of planning a whole big, gigantic, full quality system audit, pick a process. Pick the process that's doing the worst, needs the most help, just had a kappa and needs an effectiveness check. Pick one process and do an audit of that and record it and watch yourself. And then if you want help, just send me access to the video and I'll give you help. I don't have to be there. I don't have to give you feedback real time. That's how we used to do it. We used to give people feedback real time. We'd be listening to the auditee, we'd be listening to them, so we're not listening to either one very well. And then we're supposed to give you advice, and we're not supposed to interrupt the audit process. That's almost impossible. But now we can record it. So do a remote audit, record the single process audit, watch yourself, learn what you did wrong, and then try to improve one thing and just keep repeating that process, one process at a time. Yeah, it's a bunch of small single process audits, but it's so easy to learn when you can only focus on one thing at a time. And let's say it's a 2 hour audit. That's 2 hours of your life. You got to concentrate and try to improve one thing. That's practice. That's the definition of practice. You get feedback, you try to improve something, you get more feedback, you try to improve something. But if you don't have that constructive feedback, you don't improve. And if you don't concentrate on trying to do one thing better, it's not practice. So that's fundamentally what you have to do. You have to take a course, get a certificate after you pass the exam, and our exam is 100 question multiple choice. And then the last piece is now you're going to have to actually do some audits, but you're going to have somebody else that knows what they're doing critique you and fix your mistakes so you can improve. So you do an agenda. Here's the process auditing. Let's say assign Sean to do the audit. I say, Sean, you're going to audit the CAPA process. This is the person you got to contact. Go schedule that audit. So Sean calls that person, gets some information, gets some records, writes an agenda. Sean,
Mhm.
give me your agenda. Let me see what you did. I correct some things in the agenda. So next time when you make an agenda, try this,
Mhm.
improve this. The next thing Sean does, he does the opening meeting with that person. I have him record the opening meeting. I give him feedback on his opening meeting and tell him to do some things that are better next time. I tell him what he did well. Here's what you need to improve. Then he interviews the person. I watch the interview. I say, well, you missed an opportunity here to ask a really good question. We call that an audit trail. There's a trail that you could have followed. You missed it. You missed the marker. And another thing we do is we say, you forgot to select that record. Those records, those are you. If you don't ask the person for the record, if you don't ask for, give me a log, give me a record. If you don't come up with a sampling plan, you're not going to have enough information to really get a sense of whether the process works or not. So there's an art to asking for records. There's an art to sampling. There's an art to interviewing the person. Sometimes it's just being silent makes the person uncomfortable, and then they talk more. Sometimes it's putting the person at ease. Sometimes it's being 6'6" tall and realizing that the short Asian woman will talk more if you sit down. When you stand hovering over them from 6'6", you scare the crap out of them. So one of the things that I do is try to put the person at ease, and I work on my interviewing. Now that I've gotten all that information, now I get to write it up as a report. I look at their draft report. I give them feedback on their draft report. And yes, I critique their grammar, their spelling, their formatting, their font. I critique everything. And they're like, why? Why? I'm like, you want to make money, make something that looks attractive, make it presentable, make it clear and easy to read, write factual statements. Don't tell me how you feel. I don't care how you feel. Give me facts. Tell me how to improve. Add some value. So that's part of what's involved in giving feedback. It's not just, yes, you did this. So I even see people that are critiquing, they use a checklist too. Yep, he did that. Yep, he did that. Yep, he did that. You passed because you did everything you were supposed to. I have no suggestion for improvement. That is the most useless coaching that you'll ever get. You go to a coach and they don't tell you anything to improve, that's useless. What did I do wrong, coach? You did everything you were supposed to do, sorta. And that's the audit process. You agenda, you critique. Opening meeting, you critique. Interviewing skills, you critique. I did forget the closing meeting. So you have a closing meeting, you critique that, and then the audit report, you critique that. So each of the major things that they do, you critique it, give them feedback, and they do that over and over again. How many times? If you're working for a notified body, they actually have a requirement. I think it was either 15 or 20 audits that I had to do being observed by another person to be allowed to audit on my own, and then another 15 or 20 before I was allowed to lead the audit.
Hmm.
That's a lot of audits.
We had a question about a notified working for a notified body from one of the people in the QA. She wrote, I think Romania. Let's see. Sorry. I'm an auditor for ISO 13485 from 2014. I work with LRQA.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, in Romania, we don't have any notified body certification. Under what conditions could I work with a notified body? How do you get a job with a notified body as an auditor?
You apply. Like most jobs, they have an application process. You need to keep track of every single audit you've ever done. That may seem insane, but they actually ask. And they will go back and verify some of those audits just to make sure it's all truthful. Um, they're looking for not only that you have the experience, the minimum for BSI was 5 years of actual design experience in a medical device. Um, and also during that 5 years, you had to have quality and regulatory experience. and you had to have auditing experience. I had design, I had operations experience, I had auditing experience, I was quality, I was regulatory, and it was just over 5 years for medical device, but then I also had my pharma experience, which they gave me some credit for, and I had an engineering background. So I had relevant education, I had relevant work experience, and I had the number of years. But the first thing they said to me is all your training is self-training or um, like courses that aren't accredited. You're going to need to take an accredited course. So, um, if somebody wants to go work for a notified body, my course will teach them how to audit, but they're going to have to retake a accredited course in order to have the official certificate for working for a notified body. They
Mm.
will be bored out of their mind in that class, but they'll have to do it, just like I did. I sat there in the class, and the person that was instructing, he wasn't even qualified as a notified body auditor, and a lot of the information he presented was incorrect, but it was an accredited course. And I just like halfway through the course, I was like, "Do you want me to cover that part because that's wrong?" He's like, "Oh, you work as a notified body?" Yes, I'm working for BSI, and I have to take this course, but you're getting it all wrong. I'm like, so I actually took the procedures we had, and I'm like, "Here's the procedure. This is what we fill in. This is the rules. This is where
Okay.
it says it."
Okay, you're not allowed in any of my classes. That
Yeah, the
is
next week I was teaching the class.
You're right. We have another question. Companies tend to place more trust in auditors who are certified or affiliated with recognized firms. How can an independent auditor increase their credibility and perceived value? You just mentioned one way, which is to take the accredited course, obviously.
But
What else?
writing down what you've done is key. It's like when you take this class right now, that this it's a it's a it's an online meeting, but you can record this on your resume as continuing education. Now, not necessarily ASQ and RAPS will consider that to be a valid course for their continuing education credits because Sean isn't giving us a quiz, or I'm not giving you a quiz. But if I gave you a quiz and I gave what the curriculum was, you'd get continuing education credits for
Oh, maybe I should start doing that.
it. You may get very popularity with that decision, but
Check.
that's how you get your continuing education credits. You have to have this is what I took, this is when I took it, this is what the agenda or curriculum was, and here I there was an actual quiz at the end, and they gave me a certificate. So
I got
I
it.
attended something yesterday that you put on breakthrough devices in Europe. You're going to give me a certificate for that. I gave you a name. If you gave me a quiz, no question, I could get some continuing education credits for that. I personally am not going to work for a notified body. I teach the notified body auditors. So I've
Mhm.
taught BSI, I've taught DECRA, I taught TSE um, in Turkey, I've taught SGS. So I've taught four different notified bodies. Leo and his partner there, they teach the FDA. Like some of us, that's what we do. We teach so much, and we're subject matter experts in an area. We teach the experts, but
And
I still have
BSI.
BSI auditors saying, "Where are your credentials? Where did you take training on 1345 2016? I see the 2003, but I don't see the 2016." And I've actually got the record. I'm like, here is the day that the standard 2016 dropped. I was at this McDonald's. I downloaded the standard. I read it from cover to cover. I updated my slide deck, and later on that day, I taught a 2016 lead auditor course. And since then, I've taught the following lead auditor courses, and I've done the following audits. And for my list is ridiculous, but I have to actually defend myself all the time against the people I used to train, showing them, yes, I have the credential. So you never get out of this. You always have to keep your resume up to date and say, I have this. And like, it's 40 pages long. We're gonna have to get a hand truck to bring it in.
But can I make a comment on that? So there was a an audit of one of my clients, and they also the auditor says, well, anyone can fabricate a resume, and therefore it doesn't like it didn't hold up to muster, which was silly. But
Mhm.
so that was one part of it. So I do have certification, et cetera, at qualified, IRA. I don't even know why certification body does the main ones. But my question actually is on that same topic. So we have standards, we have lead auditor training on them. Now, what about all of the regulatory requirements that are embedded in ISO 13485? So Canada, US, Japan, Australia. I'm having a difficult time trying to justify that I have experience in all of those because there is no certification that I'm aware of to be able to back all of those regions. I
That's
have
correct.
EU MDR. There's an actual course on that. I took that, got another training to do lead auditor for that. But when it comes to all these regions, it's
Mhm.
hard. So I would love to
Yeah.
hear how to deal with that.
You got to be really detailed in the, and you have to put specific information in there about what your training was and what it consisted of. Even when you do self-training, um, they'd like to see exams that are graded by another person that has credentials. But ultimately, the trainer comes under scrutiny as well. And so I'd say, well, okay, BSI, who trained you? Oh, Greg Jones did. Okay, where did Jones get his training? I don't know. Exactly my point. Somebody is the top trainer, the first person that ever offered the training on that. They're the top. Where did they get their training for? They self-trained. So if it has to be valid to do self-training, but you have to document it in a way and the date you did it, what reference standards you used, how long you took, and what you did with that. Like you can read it and forget it, but did you use it? Have you have you been through multiple audits of that topic and been successful? So when I start pulling out my audit history, like, okay, he's been through more MDSAP audits than I have. He might know what he's talking about.
Mhm.
And that's what you end up with is it's piling on the boilerplate. I have all this experience. But when you're new, one of the things that can help you is um, documenting what you did, what reference standards you used, what dates you did it, and then asking somebody that you know, somebody in this group that knows that topic, ask them, could you send me a quiz and I'll take it and you grade me on it? And you laugh, but that's exactly how they did it in 1994 when 9001 came out. There were no people out there that were trained as ISO auditors. So, how do you become qualified? How do you become independent? They had to cross audit for each other. So, up in the New York State area, they had a whole bunch of auditors that got together as a team and they would audit for each other because there were no independent auditors. There were only like five or six of them. So they each audited each other's company. And that's how they first did independent auditing was they just knew other companies nearby that had 9001 and they would audit each other's companies to achieve that. And we can do the same exact thing. We can give a quiz to somebody. It doesn't have to be long, a 10 question quiz. BSI's quizzes aren't any longer that they do internally. And don't make easy questions, make hard questions, make them look stuff up, have an actual record of it. And so we've started putting everything on gravity forms on our website and it gives here's what you answered, here's the correct answer. It allows you to print it out and then we'll send you a certificate. And now you have your training certificate. But that's how you have to do it. And there's not a magic wand that all of a sudden you're certified unless you take an accredited course, pay a couple of grand, and get a piece of paper. And they can't even do that for the Canadian regulations. For a long time, there were only two instructors in all of Health Canada that were allowed to do it. And you had to be sponsored by a notified body to go take it. And you had to wait in line to get on that list. And if you
Mhm.
failed it, you paid for it yourself to go the second time.
Yeah, it
I
sounds a
was
little bit.
lucky enough to be able to do that many, many, many moons ago when I worked for a notified body.
Hmm. It sounds a little bit like being a marketing consultant, in the sense that, there is education, there are qualifications, but at the same time, anybody can say, I'm a marketing consultant, or I'm a business coach, or I'm a so then it's the same standard. Well, like, how do I know? Where does your credibility come from, and how do you demonstrate that? And so it comes down to a topic that we're going to cover on the 18th, which is honing your MedTech message, and how to be memorable. Because I think that, for everything that all the examples that Rob has given, what is the thing that's going to convince the people that you know what you're doing? That you're qualified to come in and audit them, and what's going to drive that um, over the finish line. Why are they going to pick you over the next auditor? So the question that I have for you is growth areas. What areas do you see growth? Software as a medical device, obviously, but by standard, or by MDSAP, or by
There's one that comes to mind immediately, and Matthew predicted it, so I give him all the credit for this. ISO 27001. And I'm sure Leo knows that, and maybe a few of the other of you know what this is. It's a security standard. It's not specific to medical device at all, but the Europeans are calling it state of the art. And as soon as they start calling it state of the art, it's going to be on everybody's technical file as we comply with this standard. And how are you going to show you comply with this standard? The easiest way is to have a certificate. So I'm convinced that it's just a matter of time before Europe pushes the envelope far enough that people start getting the certificate to 27001. And I think that'll be a game changer for security.
We have a BSI audit for one on December 22nd, certifying one.
There you go.
But
It's already begun.
it's a baby 13485. So
Yep.
I have a lead auditor.
And in fact, if I had gone through the trouble of preparing for 27001 a few months ago, I probably wouldn't have had a virus infect my computer and have a whole bunch of my credit cards get compromised.
You need an RFID wallet. They're $9.99 on Amazon.
I have them. That wasn't the problem, but it's another story. But yeah, I mean, you're never impenetrable for security. But there are things I would have done differently. And I realized this. I mean, I have a cybersecurity team. Matthew is a cyber forensics graduate now. And so I have the resources, I have the knowledge. I just got lazy like we all sometimes do. I mean, does everybody lock their car door in Vermont? No, they don't, because it's a dirt road off a dirt road off a dirt road. Good luck finding my car. But if I lived in New York City, the locking the door would not be enough. I'd need like 3 other methods of locking up my car, and they'd probably still get vandalized. So you have to have security, and it's not just for medical device, it's for your whole company. You need security. And so I see that being a big area. What other areas do I think that are going to be huge in the future? I think that clinical studies are going to become the norm, because everybody's doing a lot with big data now. I've gone from 10% of my clients having software to more than 50% of my clients having software. A lot of them are doing software as a medical device using big data. When you start using that big data and developing your own algorithms, you have to validate the validity of your outcomes against clinical data. So you have to have, here's my clinical data set to build it, and here's my clinical data set to validate it. So you need to understand what the rules are for clinical studies. And I see that being another area. The FDA has auditors that go out and look at the quality system, but then they also have for pre-market approval inspections, they have a clinical team that goes out and validates or verifies that the company is following all the steps that they're supposed to for a clinical study in 21 CFR 812. And for ISO, it's ISO 14155, I believe. So those are the standards that people need to start learning if they're getting into validation of clinical data or validation of algorithms that are based on this clinical data. And so I see that being another big area for auditing. I don't know anybody except a handful of ex-FDA people that audit clinical data. But CRAs could do it. CRCs could do it. Carrie, are you a person that can do it? There we go. Now I know somebody. So
What
that's
about
a really powerful skill.
what about combination products? Susan's on the call. I would think that combination products would be particularly tricky since you're at pharma and device, and they notoriously don't get along or speak the same language or
Yeah.
cooperate with each other in any way except for to put the drug in the device.
Yeah, they are definitely hard. I actually built a lead auditor course for a pharmaceutical company teaching them how to audit drug device combinations. So I've done that. I worked for a decade in pharma, so I had the skills to do it, but it's definitely harder. What a lot of people don't realize is that even though the FDA inspectors will audit you to 820 and they'll look at your quality system being compliant with 820, the regulations encourage you to follow 9001. They don't require it, but they're all written for 9001. And they actually have in 210 and 211 specific requirements in there for the same things that you'll find in 820. And it will be 1345 in February. But for example, we found some nuances in labeling. So I could create an entire course on how to audit labeling. And if you added pharma labeling to it, it'd be 3 times as long because all the specific requirements for the pharmaceutical labeling that are slightly different. So when I come to a pharma company and they're doing combination products, like, well, here's what the device side's going to audit you to, and here's what the drug side's going to audit you to. And they're like, well, which one do you follow? I'm like, yes. And they love that answer. Yes, you have to follow both of them, and you have to show evidence that you've audited to both, and you have to be compliant with both. Like, why couldn't they just write one that does both? Like, yes, in a perfect world, that will happen. In my lifetime, not at all.
I can't seem to get my hand to raise, so I didn't know if I could make a comment.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So when it comes to the labeling, you also have to be very careful because jurisdiction by jurisdiction, the expectations around that labeling are different. And in the United States, under the streamlined approach, there's also exceptions built into the labeling regulations, like for UDI and the NDA. When if you look at those exceptions, and they just came out this year with an updated guidance on it to try to make it clearer for industry, but they don't always make you do all the things that are in the drug regs if you have a device-led combination product. And if you have a drug-led combination product, if it's a single entity combination product, you don't necessarily have to have all of the device information. You need to have, for single entity, you're going to have the drug information with the applicable device information built into your drug labeling. So it's not, just be careful about overcomplicating it, which sometimes I think people do. And then it gets even more complicated when you go to Europe, because in Europe, right, you know this because you're from notified body, that notified body approach is quite different than it is in the US. And if it's a medicinal-led combination product, but it has a device constituent part to it, then the EMA and the national competent authorities don't want to see any of the device information on that label outside. So it gets, I just be really careful with that one. Anything about labeling, as you said it, I was like, be
Yeah.
Join
careful.
us in January for a special with Susan Needle leading on combination products.
There you go.
And then there's a difference between what you teach people and what's applicable to the product that they have. Um, Oftentimes, whatever they have is there's an exception. There's always something that's an exception, especially the class one devices that are sold in massive volume. I can't believe how many exceptions are in the class one. Like, oh, you have a class one. Okay, that's going to cost you extra. Like, why extra? It's a class one. Like, because there's so many exceptions, it's going to take me longer to look them all up.
Mhm. So Tiana had a question that I don't think we answered. I wasn't the first part of the call, so I apologize if I missed this. But Rob, what do you think about the audit model and task list? Like it, hate it? I'm
The
not sure.
task list,
The audit model, capital.
you're talking about the MDSAP audit approach.
I guess so. Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, okay. So MDSAP, I actually I like the concept of the seven chapters. I
Uh-huh.
like the concept of the way because they basically took what the FDA was doing and added to it some other areas that I thought were really important. And I like the concept of having it all harmonized. What I disagree with is the way the notified bodies have executed it. And I know they didn't have any say in it. The FDA said, this is what we want, and we'll take our ball and bat and go home if you don't play our way. So they did it the FDA's way. But the way it's evolved to is they have so many country specific questions that they have to document the answer to that they don't have any time but to ask the question in the checklist, write down the answer, and generate a report. They do look at a few records, but they've reduced the amount of records they sample. They've increased the duration of the audit, and they ask a bunch of useless questions.
Mm,
Um,
agreeing
when
with
you, if you're first trying to get MDSAP certified and you haven't had it before, you kind of have to do that approach to the auditing. But I've learned that it's really hard to do it in 5 days. It's extremely hard, and you can't get distracted and you can't go off on tangents. You have to stay on task and do your audit and get it done. And it will take you all 5 days. And it won't be fun for anybody, and it won't seem to add a lot of value, except you're going to get your MDSAP when you're done because I'm going to make sure there's nothing missing. That's your
Mhm,
job, is make sure nothing's missing so you get certified. But your second internal audit on MDSAP, don't do that again. You've
mhm,
already done it. All those questions have been asked. You shouldn't ask the same exact questions that you asked in your internal audit, and they were asked again in the MDSAP certification audit. Now ask new questions so you can follow that seven chapter framework, but don't go through every single country specific question again. If they modified it so it's now version 10 instead of version 9, look at what's different between 9 and 10 and ask those questions because they're new. Just like you
mhm,
would a quality system. Have you updated your procedure? No, we haven't changed that in 4 years. Well, let me read that again because I'm sure it'll be really entertaining. Like, no, write down there's been no change to the procedure in 4 years. Maybe the observation is maybe it should change because it's been so long. But if there's been no change, you don't have to read it again. And people do. They like give me the procedure, give me the log, and I'm like, why did you spend 2 hours on design controls looking at design changes when they had no design changes? And the person
mhm,
says, because the agenda had 2 hours for it.
mhm,
I'm like, sometimes you have to use your head and realize if there's no records, I'm going to write down there were no records to audit, and I'm going to shorten that duration. I'm going to spend more time on things that are important. So what's changed, what's new, what's important, not what the agenda said,
Okay.
not what the checklist said.
Mhm. On that note, who wants to become an auditor? Show of hands. Uh, no. Um, Rob, I understand that you're going to be offering a new course that you're developing
Yes.
real soon. Tell us what it is. Tell us how to join.
Um, on our website, medicaldeviceacademy.com, if you just type in lead auditor, there's a lead auditor training course there. The actual slug is lead-auditor-training. It's 32 lessons. It's all pre-recorded, all self-paced, but you also get all the updates that we do in the future for free. So as new standards come out, we'll update the videos, update the quizzes. So you get those, you don't have to pay again. When somebody says you have to take a refresher because it's been so many years, there's your opportunity. Just take it again. You get the free certificates. We're making all the certificates automated through Gravity Forms. And this course is a little different in that we put a lot of content in there just for software. So it covers all the basic stuff that you would see for most medical devices, but it has 62304 training in there. It has 62366 training in there for usability. It has AMI TIR 57 in there. It, of course, has the auditing standard, which is 19011. So we put a lot of technical standards in there. It's 14971 is in there. We've got 1345, of course. So you got a lot of technical standards that are covered in detail with quizzes. And then we go in depth, and we even have some role-playing videos where you see, like, here's an auditee, here's an auditor. What did the person do right? What did the person do wrong? So we can actually demonstrate good and bad practices for interviewing. How to write the nonconformities, how to grade the nonconformities. So every little step of the audit. We even covered things like logistics, like when you're scheduling an audit to go see a supplier, maybe you should take into account that it's 3-hour drive from the airport that you picked, and build that into your schedule. Otherwise, you'll do like I did and end up getting to the hotel around 3:30 in the morning, and they won't even let you in, and you got to go audit tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and you're going to be practically unconscious.
That's fun. Okay, well, we're out of time. I want to thank everybody for joining. I want to remind everybody that next week we're going to be focused on human factors since it's Human Factors Month. I'd like you to all show some love to the article that I posted today on human factors, where I interviewed 8 human factors experts to help pull that together. I think that human factors is an important topic, and I hope that you'll all join us for that next week. Rob referred to usability standard, and then the following week we're going to be how to make your MedTech message memorable. And that's going to round it out for the year. I'd like to encourage those of you who are on the call that would like to be speakers in January, February, March, to get on my calendar, to ping me, to let me know, hey, Sean, I have something that I'd like to talk about. I'm friendly enough, and generally try to be responsive. If you have any other questions, please feel to reach out to me or Rob. My final question for Rob is, Rob, as I sign up for your course and I run into questions, can I email somebody and get an answer?
Yes, we've actually deliver it using monday.com, and every single person on my team will have access to the individual Monday project for the student. So you can put questions right in there, or you can email us and we get the notifications and we can help you out. And you can even schedule appointments with me if you have any problems or questions. In the beginning, with the first dozen or so people going through this, I'll probably actually I'll be calling you and saying, hey, what did you think of that? I see you finished that. What did you think of it? Because all this material is new. I went back and I took everything that we had from 4 different courses, and I was like, what did I like? What did I not like? And we're trying to re-record everything.
Okay. Well, that's great. So we're going to jump. Stephanie, I'll email you directly. And, if we didn't get to your question today, I'm going to forward all the questions to Rob, and maybe he'll follow up with you. Okay. Thanks.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.